What's up? Peace and love to everybody. Welcome back. Today's video is deep. It is about anxiety and depression and my experience dealing with anxiety and depression and some of the things that I experienced growing up that led to that. This channel is about consciousness, spirituality, and an enlightened view on life. So I'm willing to go into some of the dark corners of life, the grimy areas that maybe sometimes aren't comfortable for everybody. So before I get into everything, I want to preface this video by saying everybody has the right to their own beliefs. Everybody has the right to be a part of any kind of organization you want to be part of. There's nothing wrong with that, and my story is my story, and in no way is it meant to slander people, family, friends that I have that are still involved in the Jehovah's Witness organization. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just expressing from the Drinking Gourd's perspective my story, my experience, and my goal is that my experience and my story can help you, whoever you are. Because I think there's a lot of people out there in this day and age that need help. There's a lot of people that are hurting inside, and so let's get it going. I broke into the fact in a couple of my previous videos that I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. I was raised within the Watchtower culture, within that society. I'm not baptized, but I was born into it, and when you're born into it, you essentially you're put right into all of the same experiences that a person who got baptized and came into the organization would have to go through. So, you know, when we look at anxiety and depression, if you go see a counselor or you go see a therapist, most of the time, the first thing they're going to want to know about is your childhood. They're going to want to look at your past. They're going to want to look at what happened to you. What kind of trauma did you face as a child? I'm bundled up here because it's freezing cold. We're up here in the mountains, middle of the winter, but it's beautiful. So anyway, so if you go see a therapist, they're going to talk to you about your childhood. And so for me, you know, I was an image conscious. I still am. I'm an image conscious person. And so I didn't really love getting into the grimy details of what is it that led to my experience with anxiety and depression. Growing up, I never met my father until I was an adult, so that was a big trauma for me, growing up without a father around. Now, for a person who grows up in the Jehovah's Witness organization, and if you don't have a father, there's actually a really good emphasis placed on extra attention being paid to these individuals. And for me, because I've always been a very, very spiritual person, still am a very spiritual person, I have an intense and reverence for the divine, I think I stood out a little bit more because it was obvious, like, oh, look at this little spiritual kid, right? But, you know, naturally, because of that, I had older men who would sort of take me under their wing. And that was big. That was huge for me growing up. That, you know, maybe it saved my life to some degree growing up, having that experience. But as I grew up and I progressed through the different phases of growth that we all go through, by the time I got to, like, say, maybe age 11, 12, you know, it was probably becoming obvious that my studious personality when it came to the organization and the diligence that I used to have was starting to fade a little bit, you know, which I think happens to a lot of people as they get closer to the teenage years and then go through the teenage years. And for me, by the time I got to the teenage years, I was faded. I mean, I was not, you know, I was into women, I was into drinking, I was faded out. So when you make the decision to move away from the organization. The way of dealing with you is, you know, they use the tactic of tough love, let's just say, right? And, you know, at first, as I got into my teen years, I was able to still maintain a lot of the relationships with some of the older men that I had developed when I was a child. And that was good, but as I got older into the teenage years and it became clear that I wasn't really into it, a lot of those relationships just stopped. So let's say that this happens by the time I'm like 17, 18 years old. And by this time I'm playing football, I'm playing basketball, I'm seriously considering trying to go professional doing these things. Now in this time period, I sort of begin to associate with another group of older men in a different part of Vancouver. And, you know, some of these guys, I guess you could say, in witness culture, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulation, and you know, it's a very much a fear-based culture, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit later on. But what happens is, a lot of times when people want to break the rules, they need to find a safe outlet to break the rules, a safe way to do that. And I was always kind of the safe way, because I had grown up in the organization, I was still close to the organization. So many of these older men, when they wanted to, say, go out and get drunk, maybe smoke a little bit of weed, break a couple of the rules, I was kind of like the go-to guy, because it was always kind of deemed like, well, I was safe, you know, safe outlet, I guess you could say, you know. So I developed some of those relationships and managed some of those relationships with some of these older, sort of mentor-ish type of relationships with some of these older men in my later teen years, and maybe almost a little bit into my early 20s. But as I made the decision, sort of as I progressed into my 20s, that I had some serious problems with the organization. For me, I remember when I was growing up, one time getting into trouble and talking to a particular elder, and he said, "Taze, you know what your problem is?" He said, "You just have too strong a sense of justice." And I always thought, damn, too strong a sense of justice. Because, I mean, I always thought Jesus was justice. So here I'm being told I have too strong a sense of justice, and maybe I did. You know, I was always observant of hypocrisy from a very young age. And I was sensitive to hypocrisy at a very young age. And I think I was bullied a little bit, and I just observed certain things going on in the congregation. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, like I said, I was very spiritual, and in our house, we, you know, I'm out in service. I'm taking the doors when I'm going out in service. And when it comes to the meetings, I'm underlining my watchtower with different colored pencils and whatnot. And then you had some of the kids in the hall who, like, you know, they got their watchtower at the meeting, and every single line of the paragraph is just underlined with a red pen. So you can kind of tell, like, you know, they didn't really put much effort into it. And I would always see stuff like this, and I would always think, damn, like, how is it that these people who don't really care, like, you know, a lot of the kids, you know, I'd come home and I'd be like out in the woods back here playing Bible drama parts or running around like I'm Moses or something like that, and then these kids are like playing violent video games. And so I was always like, man, what's up with the hypocrisy? Like, I just saw it from a young age, a lot of hypocrisy. And it bothered me. And so, and I always knew that I liked, there wasn't very many girls in our congregation. I always knew that I liked girls, and so I wanted, you know, and there was things I wanted to do with my life, so I was out. But, you know, when you make the decision to do that, you know, you lose a lot of connections. And as I said, for me, by the time I got into my 20s, I was mentally disconnected. I had studied for a short period of time when I was, I think, 18. I studied for about 6 months, and I think it was the Isaiah book. And I just remember I wanted to study the Bible. Like, I wanted to, like, take the Bible and, like, let's decode the Bible. Let's like go hard into the Bible. But that wasn't the way that you would study. It was always, there was a book, whether it was like the Daniel book or the Isaiah book or the Revelation book or the knowledge book or the creation book or whatever. They have these books, and you would study the book. And it was like, study this paragraph, do homework on it, come back, and I just couldn't, I was disconnected. And so the study stopped. And, by the time I was, say, 21, I was out. I was completely mentally and physically out. Although there was a part of me that still believed that this organization was the truth. I thought, in my heart, I had a rich heritage in my family with the organization, and so I did believe it was the truth, but I'd left. And once you make that decision in your 20s, you lose those connections. And I lost the connections. And so, going back to what this video is really about, anxiety and depression, I want to address anxiety and depression within the organization, and how when you go through an experience like what I went through, where you grow up without your father in your life, you replace that relationship with these people. And like I said, with me, it was many of the older men in the congregation, and losing those relationships, those connections, or having them be so conditional, where it's either, well, you either do it this way. The adage they'll give is it's Jehovah's way or the highway. But Jehovah's way really means the organization's way. And so for me, I was on the highway, and it meant losing those relationships. And, well, what does this do to a young person? I remember one time when I think I was about 14, some of the brothers from the hall came to me and they said, Taze, we've talked and we've decided that you need counseling. So, okay, all right, good to know you talked. And I was pretty pissed off about that, and I had a big attitude when I was a teenager, and so I didn't take to that well. But I ended up going into the counseling. I did start doing counseling, and in the counseling I really realized how the effect of fear, because when you grow up as a witness, you're taught fear from every angle. And I realized in counseling how harsh that ideology of fear played on me, played on my heart, especially because I'm a spiritual person. Like they always say, the ones who are paying attention, those are the ones that suffer. Because, if you're just there for whatever, you're there for the association, or you're there, there's a lot of people like that. They're not paying attention. It really doesn't matter what's said. They're just there. For me, I was listening, and when you grow up in that fear-based cycle of the end is coming, you better do this, or if you don't come to a few meetings, well, it feels like watching you drown. I remember I used to get that all the time from my grandmother. I feel like I'm watching you drown. And I used to have dreams about this. It would hit me in the middle of the night. I would wake up breathing, I feel like I was underwater drowning, and so that fear really messed with me. It really messed with me. So I worked through a lot of the anxiety. I did. And I still am working on it, constantly working on it. But when I look back, and I look back at the organization, and I really realize, and I think about the relationships I had, the people I talked to, the observations I made, depression and anxiety are everywhere around you. And it almost becomes like the fun thing to talk about. Like, oh yes, well, yeah, we're depressed. You hear, like, I remember one time working I used to do painting, so I was painting with this brother, and we were on this renovation, and there was a brother there who had served in Bethel in South Africa, and we were talking about marijuana and about how I thought marijuana was helpful for anxiety, right? And he opens up. And he starts talking about how he's battling depression every day, and how when he was in Bethel, all he saw, he made this claim, check this, he said that in Bethel in South Africa, 50% of the Bethelites are on antidepressants. Now, I don't know how anybody would ever verify that claim or how he came up with that, but he served there, and that's what he said. And so I just, you know, when I look back at that, it really just, it makes you realize, wow, why is there so much anxiety, you know? And growing up, it wasn't just me. I mean, my mother suffered from anxiety and depression. My family members suffered from anxiety and depression. My grandfather suffered from anxiety and depression. I mean, it feels like almost everybody I knew suffered from some level of anxiety and depression. So why? Why? Well, for me, I really think it comes down to two things: love versus fear. There's only just love and fear in this world, really, when you break it down, and everything else fits in between. And coming from a culture where your faith is based off of fear and love is conditional, it just fosters anxiety. Because I mean, what really is anxiety? It's fear, you know. And for me, it was funny because my anxiety was not social anxiety. You know, for me, I can stand up in front of 100 people and talk. That doesn't make me afraid. I could step on a football field in front of thousands of people and make a play. That wasn't my issue. My issue was fear about tomorrow. Are we gonna die? Is the end gonna come? Am I a bad person because I have a strong opinion? Am I a bad person because I love people unconditionally and I don't believe in different policies that say otherwise? That's where my anxiety was at. It was at a real, just a deeper level, and from such a young age. And I mean, I go back and I look at the whole situation, and I realize it is, without a doubt, because of fear. 100% because of fear. So, you know, for the most part, I moved into my 20s letting go of that. I was able to shield it, and I was cool, and I played sports, and I was able to just, but as I got farther on into my 20s, you know, my childhood, it kept coming back to me. You know, those experiences kept coming back to me, and that anxiety, it didn't go away. I was able to hide it really good. I was able to put different band-aids on it, but it never went away. And I had a funny experience, you know, in the summertime. I recently had a baby girl, and in the summer, I was at a superstore, and I bumped into an elder from a congregation that I had grown up in. And I mean, pardon me, I had known this elder for like 25 years. Like, I mean, I knew him since I was like at least 5 years old. I was at his wedding. I used to go out in service with him for hours and hours and hours. And I remember when his kids were born. We were in his book study group, so I would always be over at his house. I used to help his wife out with different tasks around the house. She'd throw me some money to help her with some work around the house. And I bumped into him, and it was crazy because, I mean, you see these people, and as I said in the beginning, I grew up without my dad around. So many men, for example, like this particular brother that I bumped into, they filled that void for a time of basically of a father figure. But then they all left, right? And as we know as parents, because I'm a parent now, no parent should love their child conditionally. A lot of parents do, sadly, but no parent should love their child conditionally. And I'm not saying that my mother loved me conditionally, but the role that a lot of these men were filling as me being a fatherless boy, there for me, mentoring me, and then having them just leave my life, was complete conditional love. So here I am at Superstore, and I bump into this brother. And so right away, he sees me, and okay, so we start talking and, you know, kind of reminiscing about the past, and he starts expressing how it just is a tremendous emotional thing for him that I'm not part of the organization anymore. And he says to me, he made kind of like 3 interesting points. The first thing he says, he's like, don't you want your family back? A comment along those lines, because he mentioned, because I had a family member who had left and then had made their way back to the organization, and he asked, look at this guy, he's got his family back. Don't you want that? And I just, when he said that, it's just, they just know how to tug your heart, right? Because who wouldn't want their family back, right? Who wouldn't want normal family relations? And for me, luckily, he may not know, but I have good relations with my family. I do. This is, like I said at the beginning, not about people. It's not about my family. It's about my experience. And I have a reasonably good relationship with my family, but just the fact that that's where he went right away, was just so, it just pissed me off. And then we keep talking, and he says to me, he asked me about my spirituality, and I have no shame in discussing spiritual things, and how I have a metaphysical approach to the scriptures, and how I strongly believe in the Creator. I don't believe in this Europeanized idea that we have here in the West of the Creator. I think it's very it's like name brand religion, but it's in me. It's always been in me, and so I actually enjoy shooting it out with conversation about religion and beliefs. And he asked me about, well, do I still believe in God? I said, yeah. I don't believe in necessarily calling him Jehovah, because that's a Europeanized name, and I don't think that that for me, I said I might lean more towards Yahweh. And he said, well, that's fine as long as you still believe in that, but just as long as you're not celebrating Christmas. And I just thought, here we go again. I said, man, out of all the things, you haven't seen me in over 10 years, right? And I had mentioned before that I was about to have a baby. So here, you haven't seen me for over 10 years. I just mentioned I'm having a baby. And you start going in about Christmas? I mean, who cares about Christmas, man? Really? Christmas? And so we keep talking, and I could see that this conversation is not going anywhere. He's just, he's asking me, he wants my number. He wants to come see me at the house with some elders. And I just, I don't want that, and then he asked me a question. He says, well, Taze, are you ready for the end? Because I had expressed, one of the reasons I left is because of this constant, the end's coming, the end's coming, the end's coming. Many people who said the end is coming are now dead. Their end came. But, here he goes with that same line of thinking. Are you ready for the end? And it was like, boom, baby. It just brought back the entire load of anxiety that I had dealt with my entire life. This fear concept, this idea that who we are as people is only important if we're following these conditions, and if not, well, are you ready for the end? And I just, after that, it really just opened me up. I had to kind of go back to all my research that I had done in the past and sort of revisit my entire anxious self and really look at that child inside and say, wow, why have you dealt with all this pain your entire life? And it's because of comments and thoughts like that from people like that who are completely loving you in a conditional way. And so, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because so many people suffer from anxiety and depression. And anxiety and depression are like two ugly cousins. You know what I'm saying? They're connected. They are connected. And so many people who are witnesses live a life depressed, waiting for the end, thinking about the end, being talked about death, and never ever enjoying the fulfillment of life, or enjoying the true love, or like they call it, the love of Christ, whatever that means, but just that unconditional love. And so why am I doing this? Because you deserve to be loved, whoever you are, no matter what your beliefs are. I don't care if you believe in just the trees and the birds that are squeaking here right now, or if you believe in a God named Jehovah, or if you believe in the sun. It doesn't matter. What matters is that everybody deserves love. And if you grow up soiled in fear, if you are constantly facing threats or constantly having to think about conditions, that's not love. That's not love at all. You know, love is when we can see beyond the conditions. Love happens when we are able to look at each other not for what we are, but who we are. Not for how good of a witness you are, or how much money you have, or how, you know, in witness culture they have different conditions for what they call success. But, you know, someone who's a pioneer, this or that, well, that might be a lot. That stuff don't matter at all. And it blinds people from being able to show true love and compassion. And when it comes to anxiety and depression, the cure for that is love and compassion. And it starts with loving yourself. And when you're told you're not good enough or you're not worthy, it's so hard to love yourself. It's so hard. And so for me, I've had to tell myself that every day to heal, to be able to move forward. And you know what? It's still a battle. Every day is a struggle. Some days suck, some days don't. But I'm getting better. And the reason that I'm putting myself out there to talk about such a grimy topic is because I know that there's definitely a chance that one of you people watching this video is in the exact same position as I have been. And you deserve love. And you can have that. But it starts with loving yourself, and it starts with forgiving yourself. Because it's not your fault what you went through as a child. It's not my fault. We all go through different things, you know, but love is the answer. So this is a bit of a longer video, but it's something that's been weighing heavy on my heart, and I feel like my experience can help people, and that's really what makes me happy, is helping other people. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. There's going to be more deep, hard-hitting content coming. Like, subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it. It's the Drinking Gourd. I'm out. Peace.